6 weeks into marriage, my husband hadn't touched me once. Not a kiss, not even holding my hand. That night, when I begged him to explain, he turned to me with cold eyes and said, "My body is my choice. You can't demand anything from me." I thought I had married the love of my life, but what I discovered instead was a man living a double life, so twisted it nearly destroyed me.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is not just about betrayal. It's about uncovering the lies hidden inside a picture-perfect marriage. Imagine believing you found your happily ever after, only to realize you've been trapped in a carefully planned fraud. Stay with me through all 10 chapters, because the ending will leave you stunned. And if you enjoy stories of survival, revenge, and justice, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss one.
The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of the antique clock on the dresser. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. 6 weeks into our marriage, I had carefully chosen a silk nightgown, soft cream with lace trim, the kind of garment meant to whisper romance before a single word was spoken. I had even lit the lavender-scented candle Trevor once said he loved, back when everything between us felt so easy. But when Trevor spoke, "My body is my choice. You can't demand anything from me." The words sliced through me sharper than any blade. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. His tone was calm, clipped, cold, like he was explaining some business policy. I stood frozen, arms wrapped tightly around myself, as if I could protect my heart from his rejection. The silk gown suddenly felt foolish, almost humiliating. I had wanted this night to be special, to remind him that we weren't just housemates sharing a bed, but husband and wife. Instead, he turned away, shoulders stiff as he stared at his glowing phone screen, like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Trevor," I whispered, the word catching in my throat, "we're married. I'm your wife. Don't you even wanna—" "Don't finish that sentence," he snapped, finally looking up at me. His green eyes, once my favorite thing about him, now glared with impatience. "My body belongs to me. Marriage doesn't give you ownership. You need to respect my boundaries." Boundaries. The word rang in my ears like a slap. I wasn't naive. I knew boundaries and consent were vital in any relationship, but this wasn't about pressure. This wasn't about control. I wasn't trying to force something he didn't want. I was trying to understand why the man who once kissed me in the rain, who whispered about our future while tracing patterns across my palm, now recoiled from me like I was poison. I remembered our 8-month courtship so vividly. Trevor had been attentive, romantic even. He would pull me close during movies, tuck strands of hair behind my ear, and kiss me softly as if I was the most precious thing he had ever held. He had proposed in Denver's botanical gardens under blooming cherry blossoms, his hands trembling as he slipped the ring onto my finger. I had thought it was love, but the moment we returned from our honeymoon in Aspen, a week of excuses, exhaustion, and distance, it was as if someone had flipped a switch. His touches stopped, his warmth evaporated, his presence turned into an absence so thick it smothered me. "This isn't normal," I said, my voice rising with a strength I hadn't expected. "Married couples are intimate. They touch, they hold each other, Trevor let out a bitter laugh, cutting me off. "You want to talk about normal? Normal is respecting your partner's choices. Normal is not pressuring someone into physical contact they don't want." He sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced this speech in the mirror. My mouth went dry. I wanted to argue, to scream, to demand answers, but the words lodged in my throat. I simply stared at him, trying to reconcile the man before me with the man I thought I had married. Without another word, Trevor slipped past me, his cologne faint in the air, and stalked out of the bedroom. I stood alone in the flickering candlelight, my confusion folding in on itself, twisting into suspicion. Something was wrong. Deeply, terrifyingly wrong. That night, I barely slept. I lay on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Trevor breathe evenly beside me. He seemed at peace, as though nothing unusual had happened. I, however, felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. By morning,
Exhaustion weighed down my limbs, but a cold determination stirred inside me. If Trevor wouldn't tell me the truth, I would have to find it myself. At breakfast, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched coffee. Trevor moved around the kitchen like a machine, precise in every motion. He buttered his toast with the same mechanical rhythm he used to tie his tie. His eyes never met mine for long, darting back to his phone every few seconds. He had always been disciplined, but now his routines felt obsessive. Calls at odd hours, unexplained disappearances, vague stories about client meetings, and when I left the house, he seemed relieved rather than concerned. "I'm going to visit my sister in Phoenix this weekend," I said suddenly, testing him. For a fraction of a second, Trevor's hand froze on his coffee mug. Then he nodded casually. "That sounds nice. How long will you be gone?" "Just the weekend." I forced a small smile. "Why? Will you miss me?" He shrugged, scrolling through his phone. "I'll manage." The dismissal stung, but it also confirmed my fear. Trevor liked me gone. He encouraged it. I studied him carefully. He was still undeniably handsome, tall, with thick dark hair and those piercing green eyes. To anyone else, he looked like the perfect husband. But now, every detail felt like camouflage, a mask he wore while hiding something much darker. I had no proof, no evidence, but my instincts screamed at me that the man I had married wasn't who he claimed to be. And so, as he left for work that afternoon, I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to start searching. Not because I was jealous, but because I could no longer shake the conviction that Trevor Caldwell, my husband, was living a lie. I didn't know yet that this choice would unravel not just my marriage, but the very foundation of the life I thought I had built. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, but it did little to warm the growing chill in my marriage. I sat at the breakfast table, watching Trevor move around the kitchen like a man rehearsing a script. Every gesture was neat, controlled, deliberate, as though he wasn't just making coffee, but performing the act of a husband for an unseen audience. I tried to remind myself that 6 weeks wasn't long, that marriage required adjustment, that maybe he was just stressed or tired or struggling with something he wasn't ready to share. But the excuses no longer felt convincing. My gut screamed otherwise. Trevor was changing, or perhaps more terrifyingly, he had already changed before I even said I do. It began small. The way he started stepping outside to take phone calls, lowering his voice so I couldn't hear. The way he closed his laptop whenever I entered the room. The way his schedule shifted without explanation. He told me he was a financial consultant, but in 6 weeks of marriage, I hadn't met a single colleague, client, or even a casual acquaintance from work. His hours were erratic, his stories vague, and whenever I asked for details, he fed me words like confidential and client privacy. In our courtship, he had been different. Trevor had always been transparent, or at least he seemed that way. He shared stories about his childhood in Oregon, his college years in Colorado, his dreams of traveling together. He once confessed he wanted kids, even teased me about baby names one night after too much wine. But now, silence, deflection, coldness. I remembered the honeymoon, how every night I reached for him and he claimed exhaustion. At first, I had accepted it. We had just planned a wedding, after all. Stress was natural, but night after night, with no touch, no intimacy, not even a kiss on the shoulder, it wasn't exhaustion, it was rejection. Carefully masked with excuses. I decided to test him. One evening, I cooked his favorite dinner, or at least what he once said was his favorite: garlic butter steak, roasted potatoes, asparagus with lemon. I set the table with candles, poured red wine, and wore the same green dress he once called irresistible. When Trevor walked in, I greeted him with a smile I didn't feel. "Welcome home." He glanced at the table, at me, at the flickering candles. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not joy, not gratitude, but discomfort. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, loosening his tie. "I wanted to. I thought we could have a special night, just the two of us." He sat,
But his phone was never far from his hand. Throughout dinner, he answered texts, his fork moving automatically to his mouth while his eyes stayed glued to the glowing screen. I'd tried conversation. How was your day? Busy. With who? Any new clients? Confidential. Every answer was a wall. By the time dessert came, I wanted to scream. Instead, I excused myself to the bathroom, gripping the counter to steady myself. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. My eyes were red, my cheeks pale. I wasn't a newlywed glowing with love. I was a stranger in my own marriage.
2 days later, I decided on another test. Over breakfast, I casually announced, I'm thinking of visiting my sister in Phoenix this weekend. Trevor's hand froze on his coffee mug, only for a heartbeat, but long enough for me to notice. Then, with practiced calm, he nodded. That sounds nice. How long will you be gone? Just the weekend. I tilted my head, watching him. Why? Will you miss me? He shrugged, scrolling through his phone again. I'll manage. His words didn't sting. Not anymore. They confirmed everything I feared. Trevor wanted me gone. That weekend, I didn't go to Phoenix. Instead, I stayed in town and followed him. I felt ridiculous at first, sitting in my car across from the office building where he claimed to work. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I would see him go inside and feel guilty for doubting him. But when I called his supposed workplace earlier, the security guard had been firm. I'm sorry, ma'am. No one named Trevor Caldwell works here. I've been with this company for 5 years. I'd know. That truth burned in my mind as I watched him pull into the parking lot at exactly 6 p.m. He didn't go inside right away. He sat in his car, talking animatedly on the phone. Even from a distance, his body language was different. Smiling, laughing, gesturing like a man in love. This wasn't the cold, detached Trevor I lived with. This was the man I remembered from our courtship. After 20 minutes, he finally entered the building. Not through the office entrance, but through the coffee shop on the ground floor. He ordered a drink, sat at a corner table, and opened his laptop. For an hour, he appeared to work, except the whole scene felt staged, like a performance for anyone watching. When he left, he tossed fake paperwork into the trash and drove home. I followed at a safe distance, my mind racing. Back in our bedroom that night, Trevor showered while I sat on the bed, staring at his phone on the nightstand. It was charging, glowing faintly, locked with a passcode. I remembered something, our wedding date. He had used it once at dinner. Not realizing I had seen, my pulse quickened. Could I? Should I? As the water ran in the bathroom, I reached for his phone, my fingers trembling. I entered the date, the screen unlocked. And in that instant, my life, my marriage, my trust, my heart would begin to unravel completely.
The glow of Trevor's phone screen burned in my hands as if it held the truth I wasn't ready to face. For a moment, my thumb hovered, torn between loyalty and desperation. But the silence of the shower running in the bathroom urged me forward. The first thing I saw were the text threads. At the top of the screen, a name I didn't recognize. Amanda. My stomach tightened. The messages were affectionate, intimate in a way I had begged Trevor to be with me. I miss you so much. Can't wait for the weekend. Almost over, baby. We'll be together soon. My vision blurred as tears welled in my eyes. Attached to some of the messages were photos. Trevor's smiling beside a woman with long chestnut hair, both of them wearing wedding bands, both standing in front of what looked like a courthouse. My breath caught in my throat. No, this can't be real. This is some kind of mistake. The sound of the shower shutting off jolted me back into motion. With shaking hands, I forwarded the most damning photos and messages to my own phone, then carefully replaced his on the nightstand, setting it at the same angle I had found it. When Trevor emerged, wrapped in a towel, humming softly, I forced myself to flip through a magazine, pretending I hadn't just shattered the illusion of my marriage. Think I'll turn in early tonight, I murmured, praying he couldn't hear the quake in my voice. Good idea, he replied easily, as if nothing had happened. He slipped under the covers, his relief so palpable it made me sick. But sleep wouldn't come for me. I lay awake in the dark, the evidence of his betrayal pulsing in my mind. I needed more than texts and photos. I needed proof.
something undeniable, something I could use, and I would find it.
The next afternoon, once Trevor left for one of his mysterious client meetings, I entered his home office. Normally, I respected privacy, but respect had no place in a marriage built on lies. The office was immaculate, almost unnervingly so. His desk drawers contained only pens, paper clips, neatly stacked envelopes. His filing cabinet offered nothing but generic financial documents. No personal letters, no photos, no clutter that would betray a real person's life. But liars slip up. They always do. I was about to give up when something caught my eye. The trash can beside the desk. It looked ordinary at first, filled with shredded paper and receipts, but buried halfway down, something bright peeked through. I pulled it out carefully, heart pounding. It was a receipt from a flower shop in Las Vegas 3 weeks ago, the exact weekend Trevor had claimed to be at a financial conference in Salt Lake City. Not only that, but scrawled on the back in his handwriting was a phone number, Nevada area code. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. I photographed the receipt, the number, the date, evidence. The man I married had lied about his whereabouts, lied about his work, lied about everything. I stared at the receipt until the words blurred, nausea rising in my throat. A dozen red roses. For who? For Amanda? For his real wife? That evening, Trevor came home as if nothing was wrong, whistling under his breath. He carried takeout in one hand, his tie loosened, his smile practiced. I studied him like a stranger, every gesture now suspect. "How was your conference call?" I asked casually. "Good," he said without hesitation, setting the takeout on the counter. "We finalized some client contracts." I forced a smile. "That's great," but inside, my mind screamed. Client contracts? Or roses in Las Vegas? It wasn't just the receipt. It was everything. The way he avoided intimacy. The way he encouraged me to leave town. The way he staged his workdays like a play. The Trevor I fell in love with was gone. Or worse, maybe he had never existed at all. I couldn't rely on scraps of paper and forwarded texts. I needed undeniable proof. So, the next day, I returned to the office building where Trevor claimed to work. This time, I parked closer, my heart racing as I watched him pull into the lot at 6 p.m. Again, he sat in his car, laughing and gesturing on the phone. The tenderness in his voice, even from a distance, was unmistakable. He wasn't talking to a client, he was talking to her. When he finally walked inside, he didn't use the office entrance. He went straight to the coffee shop, ordered his usual, and set up his laptop. He spent an hour pretending to work, occasionally glancing around as if making sure someone was watching. But I wasn't fooled. When he left, he carried a folder of papers. He tossed them in the trash outside before heading to his car. Once he drove away, I rushed over, hands trembling as I pulled the papers out. Blank contracts, dummy financial statements, all of it fake. He wasn't a consultant. He wasn't working late. He was staging an entire identity. That night, Trevor was cheerful over dinner. Too cheerful. He asked about my day, complimented my cooking, even brushed a kiss against my cheek. It should have felt like a breakthrough, but instead it felt like manipulation, a performance meant to distract me from the truth. I nodded and smiled, but inside, the receipt from Las Vegas burned like a brand. The next morning, I stared at Trevor across the table as he scrolled through his phone, sipping his coffee. His green eyes caught mine briefly before darting away. He thought I was still blind, but I had seen too much. The roses, the texts, the fake job, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The office building loomed tall and gleaming, its mirrored windows reflecting the fading Denver skyline. I sat in my car across the street, my hands clenched around the steering wheel. Trevor had parked in his usual spot, walking briskly toward the lobby as if he belonged there. But I knew better now. The receipt from Las Vegas, the secret phone calls, the texts to Amanda, the staged paperwork. Each piece of evidence was a crack in the mask of the man I had married. Still, part of me hoped, foolishly,
desperately that there might be another explanation, that I had misunderstood, that Trevor was hiding something benign, not sinister. So when I pushed open the glass door of the office building that afternoon, my heart pounded with both dread and hope. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. A uniformed security guard sat behind the desk, flipping through a clipboard. "Hi," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm looking for Trevor Caldwell. He works here. Financial consulting firm on the 10th floor. The guard frowned, scanning the employee list. He shook his head. "I've been here 5 years. Nobody by that name works in this building, ma'am." The words hit like ice water. "Are you sure?" My voice cracked. "Tall, dark hair, green eyes? He's here almost every evening." The guard gave me a sympathetic look. "Sorry, if he told you he works here, he wasn't honest with you." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest constricted as the truth settled heavy in my stomach. Trevor's entire career, his office, his meetings, his late nights, was a fabrication. I thanked the guard numbly and stepped outside, my legs shaky. I slid into my car and sat frozen, staring at the building. At 6 p.m., right on schedule, Trevor's car pulled into the lot. He parked, smoothed his hair in the rearview mirror, and stepped out with his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He walked into the lobby with the confidence of a man arriving at work. I ducked lower in my seat, my heart hammering. Minutes later, through the coffee shop windows, I saw him order a drink, settle at a corner table, and open his laptop. He typed with focus, occasionally glancing at his phone. To anyone watching, he looked like a hard-working professional catching up on late paperwork. But I knew the truth. This wasn't work. It was theater. When his phone rang, he lit up, laughing, gesturing, eyes sparkling. Even from across the street, I recognized the transformation. This was Trevor as I once knew him. Warm, charming, affectionate, but those pieces of him were reserved for someone else, for Amanda. By the time Trevor left the building, carrying a folder of what I now assumed were meaningless documents, my fingernails had left crescents in my palms from clenching so tightly. I wanted to storm across the street, confront him right there under the streetlights. I wanted to scream, "Who is she? Why did you marry me? What have you been lying about?" But fear held me back. What if he lied again? What if he turned it around, made me doubt myself the way he always did? No, confrontation wasn't the answer. I needed evidence, proof strong enough to strip away every excuse. So instead, I followed. I kept my headlights dim, trailing him at a distance through the winding Denver streets. My heart thudded with each turn, each red light. He didn't head home immediately. Instead, he stopped at a small convenience store, emerging 10 minutes later with a 6-pack of beer and a bouquet of cheap daisies. Daisies, not roses. Not the kind of flowers a man buys for romance. Was it a cover? Something to throw me off? I snapped a photo of him entering the store, another of him exiting. Documentation. A growing archive of deception. Finally, he drove home. By the time I pulled into our driveway minutes later, Trevor's car was already parked, and the house lights glowed warm and inviting, like nothing had ever been wrong. Inside, Trevor greeted me with a smile. "You're home early," he said, setting the daisies in a vase like a husband trying to score points. "Traffic was light," I replied flatly. We ate dinner together, his small talk flowing effortlessly. He told me about clients, about contracts, his voice smooth and confident. If I hadn't just watched him fabricate his life, I might have believed him. I nodded, playing along, but every word he spoke was a reminder of how thoroughly he had deceived me. Later, when he kissed my cheek before bed, the briefest brush of lips, devoid of warmth, I forced myself not to flinch, because tomorrow I would dig deeper. In the silence of our bedroom, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Trevor's lies were bigger than infidelity, bigger than coldness or rejection. He wasn't just hiding a mistress, he was hiding an entire identity, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I thought of the Las Vegas receipt, the secret phone calls, the staged job. I thought of Amanda's name flashing across his phone, of the courthouse photos that made my blood run cold. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. Something sinister was unfolding beneath the surface of my marriage, and I would find out what. The next morning, I brewed coffee and waited for Trevor to leave. When the door finally closed behind him, I felt a strange surge of courage. This wasn't about jealousy anymore. It wasn't even about betrayal. This was survival. I returned to his office, searching again with renewed determination. I combed through drawers, flipped through folders, checked every corner, and then I saw it. The trash can, half full again. At the bottom, crumpled beneath receipts and envelopes, was another slip of paper. A printed schedule. Flights to and from Las Vegas. The dates matched the flower shop receipt. My breath caught. Trevor hadn't just lied about work. He had been in Las Vegas with someone else. With Amanda.
That night, the house felt like a stage set after the audience had gone home. Props arranged, lights dimmed, silence heavy as velvet. Trevor brushed my cheek with a perfunctory kiss and disappeared into the steamy glow of the bathroom. The water roared on. The exhaust fan shook the thin wall between us. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his phone, its black mirror glinting on the nightstand like an eye that dared me to blink first. My fingers moved before my doubts caught up. The passcode was the same. Our wedding date. A romantic joke, once. A skeleton key, now. The phone opened with an indifferent swipe. I didn't go to the messages first. I already knew about Amanda. I needed something larger. Architecture, not whispers. I opened photos and switched to albums, places. A constellation of pins dotted the map of the American West. Denver, Aspen, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, glittering like a wound. I tapped the Vegas cluster. A neat grid of images bloomed. Trevor in a navy suit outside a courthouse arch, Amanda in a white summer dress, small bouquet clutched to her chest, hair caught mid-laugh. There were candids, too. Selfies in warm hotel light, a blurry shot of tangled hands over a dinner table, the kind of photographs that lived in the soft edges of intimacy. My stomach tried to climb into my throat. I pressed into the metadata. Date, 8 months ago. Location, Clark County Courthouse. The timestamps matched the calendar squares he'd told me were a conference in Salt Lake City. I scrolled deeper. A scan of a marriage license, just crooked enough to show it had been snapped on the down low. A brief video. Trevor's voice, hushed, playful. "Don't move, Mrs. Caldwell," he said. Amanda giggled. The word Mrs. ricocheted in my skull, left a ringing. Folder by folder, I followed the breadcrumb trail of a life I didn't know I was standing beside. Notes read like a production Bible. One was titled Rhythm and bulleted with phrases I knew too well. Boundaries, autonomy, say it calm, repeat if challenged, deflect to work. Confidentiality equals protective. Encourage travel. Build tolerance for absence. Delay intimacy equals less emotional entanglement. I stared at the list until the screen blurred. He hadn't simply been distant. He had been choreographing distance, practicing lines. The speech he'd given me, "My body is my choice," wasn't a cry of sovereignty. It was strategy. Another note, longer, colder, titled Prenup Playbook. I skimmed, mouth dry, frame as mutual shield. Appeal to her independence, pride. "You're smart, you'd insist if roles reversed." Clause, early divorce equals she gets nothing. Husband claims 50% of premarital assets contributed to marital use. Trust fund mechanics, timing, triggers, signatories, pressure points, grandma's legacy, honoring intent. The words were surgical, not a lover's handwriting, a tactician's. The shower hissed. Water beat tile. I checked the door, still closed, steam curling from its edges like the breath of something asleep. I opened mail. He'd scrubbed most of it, but no one erases everything. In all mail, I found receipts routed to a catch-all address I'd never seen. An alias buried behind filters, tcadvisory@pm.me. There were flight confirmations to McCarran, bank alerts from institutions I didn't recognize,
lines of credit approved with the confidence of someone who had worn 1,000 false names, a secure message from a client onboarding portal, verification approved, spousal documentation on file. My pulse rapped against my ribs. I forwarded everything to my own inbox, then froze, imagining some alert pinging his device. Instead, I created a new secret archive. I used an email I hadn't touched since college, then exported the damning files to my cloud with innocuous names. Garden inspo, soup recipes, ski trip ITIN, camouflage of domestic trivia. If you hunted, he would have to sift through my life the way I was sifting through his. A vibration rattled the phone in my hand. An incoming text. Amanda, how's our timing? Weekend still safe? Ellipsis dots pulsed under my thumb. I didn't dare open the thread. I didn't want the read receipt to blink betrayal. Instead, I flicked to calendar. Color-coded blocks stacked like Tetris. Client call, review, on-site, clean, convenient, and entirely fabricated. But one entry was older, uncolored, a ghost left by a different hand. Clark County Clerk, 10 a.m. Don't forget IDs. A heart emoji. My eyes moved to the following week. M. Move utilities. Lease. Notes appended. Keep mailbox key. Don't forward. It wasn't a random affair. It was logistics. A domestic gravity that pulled everything toward it. The water stopped. Silence slid under the door. I slipped the phone back to the nightstand, aligning it exactly in its rectangle of heat-changed wood. I stepped into the dark of the hall, heart battering my ribs. When the bathroom door opened, steam billowed out and Trevor emerged in a towel, hair damp, eyes bright. He looked young like this, unarmored. The charm that had first caught me at a coffee shop downtown glinted at the edges of his smile like light on glass. "Everything okay?" he asked, easy, affectionate, lines delivered by a consummate actor. "Fine," I said, false syllable, steady voice. He moved past me with a murmured, "Sleep early," and disappeared into the bedroom. I pressed my palms to the cool hallway wall and counted to 50, then 100. When I returned, he was already in bed, back turned, breathing slow, as if rest came to him on command. The phone sat within reach of his right hand like a second pulse. I didn't sleep. I lay rigid, tracing the map I'd uncovered until the lines connected of their own accord. The rehearsed boundaries, the honeymoon refusal, the fake office, the Vegas thread. I thought of my grandmother's trust, of the conversation in the lawyer's office when she'd insisted her will be a shield for my future. I had believed marriage would make that future richer, not this. Around 2 a.m., hunger arrived, blunt and unexpected. In the kitchen's blue light, I found myself pouring cereal like a woman in an advertisement for loneliness. I chewed and watched the window's blackness, listening to the quiet house, the refrigerator's click, the faint throat clear of the pipes. In that empty soundscape, a decision found me. It was plain and resolute, like the line you draw with a ruler and never erase. I would not confront Trevor empty-handed. I would not give him the opportunity to turn my fear into foolishness. I would build a case. Back in bed, I rehearsed a morning I did not feel. Coffee, small talk, lipstick. When dawn came, I wore a soft sweater he'd once said made me look steady. I brewed his favorite roast and set a mug at his place. When he came in, tie loose, hair damp again from the shower he took to shake off sleep, he glanced at the cup and smiled with practiced gratitude. "You're sweet," he said. "I'm seeing someone downtown at 11, I replied, casual as weather, about a freelance design project. I stirred honey into my own coffee and didn't wince at the taste. "I might be out most of the afternoon." "Busy girl," he said, kissing my hair, a prop kiss. He left at 8:17, a departure time so consistent I wondered if he liked the symmetry of the digits. When the front door closed, I exhaled the breath I'd been hoarding. I gathered the receipt from Las Vegas I'd photographed, the screenshots I'd printed at a 24-hour kiosk while he showered, the notes I'd copied by hand, so the graph of his deceit lived on paper, not just in code. I slid it all into a plain folder, unmarked. There is a type of quiet you only hear when you are finally moving toward your own rescue. It hummed under my skin as I dressed in something practical, as I locked the front door, as the elevator ride felt both too long and not long enough. The city outside was crisp,
sun already burning the chill off the sidewalks. Denver gleamed like a promise kept. On the way downtown, I saw everything with terrible clarity. The florist unloading yellow buckets of roses, a man in a suit balancing coffee in a briefcase, a young couple crossing against the light, hands locked, oblivious to traffic. It hurt to sight of that simple certainty between their fingers. I parked beneath a tower of glass whose angles cut the sky. Henley Law occupied the 15th floor. In the lobby, a wall of windows offered a panorama of the Rockies, blue and implacable. I pressed my fingertips to the cool of the elevator's steel and watched the numbers climb. I didn't yet know what Patricia Henley would say. I didn't know the terms: bigamy, fraud, void marriage, the language of undoing. I only knew that the man in my bed had written a script for my life without my consent, and I intended to revise it with ink that didn't wash away. When the doors slid open, I stepped onto plush carpet, folder tucked under my arm like a passport. The receptionist looked up with a professional smile that softened when she saw my face. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "Justine Crawford, 11 o'clock with Miss Henley." "Of course," she said. "She's ready for you." As I crossed the threshold into Patricia's office, Denver sprawled behind her in sharp relief. Mountains vast, city grid crisp, sky limitless. Patricia rose, hand extended, eyes quick and kind and flint hard where they needed to be. "Justine, let's get you safe." I set the folder on her desk and opened it to my life's fracture lines, to photos and notes and timestamps that formed a story so clean it felt carved. The words I had been speaking to myself all night finally found air. "My husband," I said, "is not my husband at all."
The 15th floor smelled faintly of leather and lemon oil, the air cool enough to make me feel awake down to the bones. Through a wall of glass, the front range jagged the horizon, blue and unbothered by human drama. I held my plain manila folder like a flotation device and stepped into an office lined with books whose spines were the color of old blood and deep sea. Behind the desk stood a woman in a charcoal suit whose presence said two things at once: "I see you," and "This will be handled." "Justine," she said, extending a firm hand. "Patricia Henley, have a seat." Her desk was a landscape of order. Legal pads squared, a fountain pen aligned with a ruler, a coaster exactly centered under a glass of water beading with condensation. When I set the folder down, my fingers didn't want to let go. I released it anyway. "I don't know how to begin," I said. "Begin at the beginning," she replied. "Then show me the proof." I told her about the bedroom and the cold sentence that split my 6-week marriage in two, about the staged office, the coffee shop work play, about the Las Vegas receipt and the Nevada number, the phone unlocked by a date that had meant love until it meant access. I kept my voice steady because I needed the narrative to stand on its own feet, unwarped by grief. Patricia listened without interrupting, only occasionally jotting a note in tidy, slanted script. When I finished, she turned the folder toward herself and began to go through it page by page. A lawyer's silence is not an absence, it is a diagnostic. She studied the images: Trevor's navy suit against sandstone courthouse, Amanda's white dress that wasn't a wedding gown so much as a summer yes. She checked metadata. She read my hand-copied notes titled Rhythm and Prenup Playbook, her eyebrow lifting the slightest degree at encourage travel, build tolerance for absence. "This is thorough," she said. "You did well to preserve originals and copy what you couldn't export. Did you alter anything?" "No, I made prints elsewhere. I renamed files in my own archive, but the originals are intact on his phone." "Good." She tapped the fountain pen against the pad once. "We're potentially looking at 3 parallel tracks: family court, criminal exposure, and financial triage. First, the marriage itself. Your ceremony is valid on your side. If he was already married, his ceremony with you is voidable as to him and creates exposure. That matters. It means leverage." The word leverage landed like a steel rung in a climbing wall. "Second," she continued, "if those photos and dates are what they appear to be, we're talking bigamy. That's a crime. How prosecutors proceed depends on evidence and appetite, but the risk to him is real. Third, the financial track. You mentioned a trust?" "My grandmother's," I said, swallowing. "He pushed a prenup, said it protected us both. There was a clause I stopped. I could see my grandmother's hands, paper thin and warm, folding the corner of a crossword. For your future, honey, I'd signed to honor her thrift,
her belief that good fences made good neighbors. Trevor had brought the fence and a bulldozer. Patricia's face softened for half a second. We'll get a copy. If the agreement was procured by fraud, we have arguments to unwind its worst teeth. But I don't want to fight this blind. She closed the folder carefully, as if it contained fine glassware. I'd like to bring in an investigator I trust, former police. He's discreet, fast, understands the difference between suspicion and proof. Please, I said, the word feeling both like surrender and the first firm command I had issued to my own life in weeks.
She pressed a button. "Can you step in, Michael?" she said into the intercom. A minute later, the door opened and a compact man in his 50s entered, hair clipped close, eyes quick but not unkind. He wore a dark sport coat and a tie that had seen action rather than fashion magazines. He shook my hand with a grip that said present. "Mrs. Crawford," he said. Patricia filled me in on the high points. "This is Detective Michael Torres," Patricia said. "He does this work better than anyone I know." "Michael is fine," he said, taking the chair beside me rather than across, as if we were already on the same side of a table. "Tell me the parts that don't fit, the places your gut made noise." I repeated the essentials. Honeymoon refusals, the script of boundaries, the staged office, the vaguest anomalies. He listened like a craftsman measuring a warped board with his fingertips, nodding at beats that matched a rhythm he recognized. "I've seen variations on this," he said at last. "Quick romance, fast marriage, early distance. They map themselves to what you need and mirror your values back at you until signatures are inked. When they're sloppy, they chase cash. When they're disciplined, they chase structure. Credit lines, trust triggers, long plays." He pulled a small black case from his inside pocket, opened it, and set a thumb-sized device on Patricia's blotter. "Colorado is one-party consent for audio. If you are a party to the conversation, you can record without telling him. If he makes admissions, if he discusses plans, if he threatens or outlines mechanics, we capture it." He slid the device toward me. It felt heavier than its size when I placed it in my palm. "What exactly are you going to do?" I asked. "First pass," Michael said, "is background. Birth records, aliases, professional licenses, if any, marriage indexes in Colorado, Nevada, Utah, Arizona. If Amanda is who you think she is, we find her legal name, maiden name, any changes. We pull Vegas marriage logs by date range. We confirm whether a license exists and whether it's registered. We look for addresses. We check employer rosters and payroll tax filings for the company he claims. If they don't know him, we note it in writing. We follow money, public filings, UCC liens, property records, even trash pulls if necessary. And we do it fast." Patricia added, "Meanwhile, I want your bank to place a watch on your trust-related accounts and any requests for new lines secured by it. Quietly. We do not want him spooked. We want him confident." "What if he's already opened things I can't see?" I asked. "That's a common move. New accounts in your name with his email as the point of contact. They sit dormant to age legitimacy, then he harvests. We can flag with bureaus and institutions, strategically. If we throw a net over everything at once, he'll smell it. If we set a few tripwires, we can watch where he steps." It sounded like hunting. It was hunting. I was done being prey. Patricia turned a legal pad around to face me. She'd sketched a columned plan. Evidence preservation. Keep your copies. Don't tip the phone again unless necessary. No cloud autosyncs that might ping him. Financial hygiene. Separate device to contact institutions. New passwords on any account you control. MFA keys rotated. Operational security. Keep normal routines. No dramatic conversations without the recorder. Do not confront. Legal posture. Obtain prenup. Analyze for choke points. Prepare emergency petition if funds move. 2 more practicalities, she said. First, if you have a safe deposit box, use it. Originals go there. If you don't, I'll arrange one. Second, we need you calm. He's trained you to react so he can steer. Our strength is patience, stapled to documentation. Calm. The word felt alien and slightly medicinal, but something in the architecture of their plan made calm seem possible, like the feeling of stepping onto a staircase that doesn't creak. Michael leaned in slightly. If he says anything about timing, this weekend, after papers, once the transfer clears, hit record. Don't push, invite. I'm confused. Help me understand. Is a better wedge than accusation. People confess to the version of themselves they want to be. Let him think he's the mastermind shepherding a naive spouse. It's the role he wrote. A laugh cracked out of me. Not humor, but recognition so sharp it sparked. He has notes, scripts. He even rehearsed lines about autonomy, about confidentiality. He even wrote out how to sell the prenup, how to lean on my pride. Patricia's eyes were flint again. Then we'll use his script against him. She slid a retainer agreement across the desk. The language was plain but edged. Scope of representation, confidentiality, conflicts. I signed, H-stroke firmer than the last. Initials anchoring corners like tent pegs in wind. We'll start today, Michael said, already rising. Give me 72 hours for a first report. You'll have a secure portal link in your email by this afternoon. Use that, not text. If anything urgent hits, call Patricia. If anything dangerous hits, physical, emotional, financial, call me, then call 911. He paused at the door. And Justine, this is not your shame to carry. It's your story to steer. When the door closed behind him, the office felt larger. Patricia capped her pen and offered me the sweating glass of water I'd been ignoring. I took it, the cold stinging my fingers pleasantly. What happens if the marriage is real? I asked softly. Theirs. Then yours with him is legally poisoned, she said, which turns his prenup into tinder. Courts don't bless contracts that cloak fraud. Instead of him taking half your past, he'll be lucky to keep his future. I let that image bloom. Not revenge like a knife, but justice like a ledger corrected. File for divorce? I asked. Soon, she said, but not yet. His pattern suggests he's waiting for you to do exactly that. Some agreements only trigger upon filing. If he's built a timing mechanism around your actions, we'll turn the key on our schedule. Not his. A small, incredulous smile tugged at my mouth. A trap. A lawful one, she said. He will walk into it because he believes he built the maze. I rose, lighter and heavier at once. On the way out, I caught my reflection in the glass. A woman holding her posture like a shield, eyes ringed but bright. The receptionist gave me a nod that felt like a benediction. In the elevator, I slid the recorder into my bag. It seemed impossible that something so small could carry such weight. On the street, noon traffic hummed. A bicycle bell chimed. Somewhere, a dog barked twice and went quiet. I breathed in air that tasted like metal and sun. When I reached my car, I sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel, not starting the engine. Patricia's plan nested in my chest like a scaffold. Michael's timeline ticked invisibly. I thought of Trevor's careful mornings, his 8:17 departures, the distance manufactured to look like principle. I thought of the girl in white outside a Nevada courthouse and wondered if she wore love like I did, wholehearted, undefended, or if she too understood that what they built together was a business plan with lace trim. At home, the house greeted me with its curated peace. I placed the new legal folder in a tote bag I could grab if I had to leave fast. I stashed a second copy of the prints where even I had to think twice to find them. Then I made tea, of all domestic absurdities, and waited for the lock to turn at 6:32 as it always did. When it did, I stood and smiled, the way an understudy steps into the light on opening night, not because she is fearless, but because she knows her lines. Hey, Trevor said, loosening his tie, the day sloughing off him like water. How was your day? Productive, I said, and meant it. Yours? He smiled with his eyes before his mouth, the signature that had sold me so many beliefs. Busy. We ate, he talked. I asked nothing that would reveal I knew the route of his deceit. After dishes, he drifted toward his office, phone in hand. The door clicked almost shut. I slipped the recorder into my sweater pocket and followed the line of the hallway, silent as a promise. I was ready to hear the truth and his own voice. Trevor's office door never fully closed. He liked the visual of transparency, the angle that suggested nothing to hide. From the hallway, the slit of light cut across the floor like a blade. I stood just outside the threshold, the recorder warm in my sweater pocket, my pulse knocking at my throat. If he turned, he'd see me. If he called my name, my voice might crack, and the thin ice I stood on would shatter. He didn't turn. I heard him settle into his chair. The familiar, soft creak, then the brief, eager rhythm of thumbs on glass. A cull tone chirped, and he lowered his voice one notch, the register he reserved for intimacy. "Hey, you," he said. A smile draped over the words. "Miss me?" The answer arrived as a muffled rise in the room, her voice too distant to make out the words, but not the shape of them. "Amanda." I pressed my back to the wall and eased the recorder up into my palm, thumb rolling the switch. The tiny red LED winked alive, a cardinal eye in the dark. "I know," he murmured, chair wheels whispering as he leaned back. "It's almost done, I promise. The timing's just delicate." Silence, then her voice, a low ribbon through the gap. My body leaned toward the slit of door, the way a plant strains for sun. I caught fragments. "Weekend, sure, safe." The cadence was domestic, not dramatic. Two people coordinating errands and an escape. "She won't make trouble," Trevor said, tone shifting into confidence. "Honestly, I think she's going to file herself. That would make it clean. She keeps her pride, I keep the plan. If she files inside the window, the clip hers. Exactly like we designed." The word designed made my fingers curl. He went on, musing like a craftsman admiring his own joinery. "The clause triggers only if she files in year 1. The judges like the language. Mutual protection, modern partnership, all that. And she bought it. Top to bottom. Pride is an asset if you handle it right." My breath went shallow. I slid my phone out with my other hand and opened the Notes app, tapping a single letter to keep the screen alive in case I needed to mark the moment. "Trust, too," he added, casual as weather. "Her grandmother set that thing up like a fortress. But there are gates if you know how to look. Marriage certificate, spousal verification, the right tone on the phone. You don't barge a vault. You get invited in." A soft laugh from Amanda. The sound struck like ice chips against glass. He continued, businesslike now. "A few lines aged, a few accounts seeded. I don't touch her day-to-day stuff. Spooks the system. I let the scaffolding cure. Then when the papers land, we harvest. Simple." A pause. Papers rustled. "Yes," he said, answering a question I couldn't hear. "Soon. A week or two. Once the petition is stamped, the freeze rests on a couple of approvals. We move, and we're as good as gone before she knows there's a second set of books." The room tilted. The house tilted. My life tilted. He spoke again, lower, coaxing. "Don't worry. I wrote the lines, remember? We've done the rehearsal. She'll steer exactly where I want. The speech works. Boundaries, autonomy, respectful distance. It breaks any confrontation before it starts. She backs up, I keep walking." The words hit a nerve so precise it felt surgical. I had heard that speech. I had flinched and retreated on cue. Amanda's voice rose again, more distinct now, an edge beneath the silk. "Are you sure? She seems," Trevor chuckled softly, "she's compliant. She wants to be good at marriage. That's what I chose her for." The cruelty of it was not in volume, but in ease. I pressed the recorder closer to the seam of the door, careful not to touch it. The LED's tiny glow felt like a lighthouse for a ship I hoped was coming. "She's making it easier," he added, voice warming with self-satisfaction. "She's distant now, guarded. That means she's thinking divorce. Which means she'll be the one to pull the pin. Then the clause is gospel. And we go to work. I swear, the hardest part is always the waiting." He shifted, chair wheels squeaking. No, I'm not worried about the job front. The office routine plays well. I smile, I type, I toss dummy paperwork. If she follows me, she'll see what I want her to see. It was like hearing a magician explain the trick while your watch sits in his pocket. Another pause. I heard his voice soften into the rhythm he had once used with me. Attentive, amused, present. "How was your day? Tell me something good." He shifted, chair wheels squeaking. Of course I remember. The colleague with the, yeah, how'd that go? He made small, fond noises while she spoke. Little affirmations stitched through her story. The tenderness slid under my skin and set off every alarm at once. They talked like that for 10 minutes. Grocery lists threaded with larceny. Weekend plans laced with theft. A couple smoothing their calendar, ignoring the body tied to the tracks. At last, the tone shifted to goodbye. Soon, he promised, voice gone whisper soft. Soon, kiss. The line clicked off. The chair creaked forward, keys tapped. The minute hand on the hallway clock moved with a microscopic, traitorous sigh. I stepped back on silent feet and slipped the recorder deep into my pocket. My hands had gone cold. In the mirror over the console table, a woman looked back with eyes too bright and skin too pale, as if all her color had bled into something braced and sharp. I went to the kitchen and ran water I didn't need, then turned it off and stood in the sudden quiet until my breathing slowed. When I could trust my voice, I crossed the hall and pushed his office door wider, leaning against the frame with practiced ease. "Everything okay?" I asked. Casual. He glanced up, smile ready. He had 1,000 of them, each calibrated to a context. This one was domestic, unthreatened. "Yeah, just wrapping a few things. You?" "I'm going to read for a while," I said. "Tea?" "Please," he said, and returned to his screen. I made the tea and did not poison it. I brought him a mug and did not throw it. He said, "Thanks, babe," and the word skimmed my skin like a pebble over water. Surface disruption, with no depth. Later, in bed, he fell asleep in under 5 minutes. I lay there, listening to the shape of his breathing, counting the beats between the little double exhales he made on the cusp of dreams. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. I had the thing I came for. His voice, his plan, his timeline. In the morning, after he left at 8:17 like a metronome, I drove downtown with the recorder nestled in a sunglasses case. Patricia's assistant ushered me in within minutes. The glass behind her desk wore a new weather, high, thin cloud, sunlight in ribbons. I set the device on Patricia's blotter. "I got it," I said. She didn't touch it until I finished speaking. When I stopped, she pressed play. Michael arrived halfway through and stood listening with his arms folded, head bowed slightly as if in church. We heard it again. The claws, the window, the harvest, the confidence. When the click of the call ending filled the room, no one spoke for 3 long breaths. Patricia reached for a legal pad, and in neat block letters wrote intent across the top. Under it, timing, mechanics, financial access, manipulation of spouse. Michael exhaled. That's as clean as it gets. No coercion needed. He volunteered the architecture. We can date the recording, tie it to the prenup clause, match the bank approvals he bragged about to actual events. Next steps, Patricia said, already moving. We preserve this file with affidavit and chain of custody. Michael, you keep digging Vegas. License, certificate, registration, any address links to Amanda. I'll contact a federal friend discreetly. The financial pattern screams wire and mail fraud in addition to bigamy. We'll also prepare a limited injunction motion to freeze movement against the trust if necessary. But, she tapped the pad, we do not spook him. We want the attempt. My throat worked. You want him to try? We want him caught with his hand in the right jar, she said. Attempt plus plan equals conspiracy. It's the difference between a story and a sentence. Michael angled toward me. Can you keep playing the part? Same routines, same questions you've been asking? I thought of last night's tea, of the tunnel I had walked with a match in my fist. Yes, I said. It surprised me how easily the word came. Yes. Patricia underlined OPSEC on the pad. No confrontations, no changes to your schedules that look like fear. If he pushes, you be fog. If he preens, you be mirror. And if he sets a date, you text me a single word. Clock will already be in motion. Trevor said a week or 2. He sounded giddy. Good, Michael said, not smiling. Elation is sloppy. I left their office lighter than I arrived. Not because the burden was smaller, but because it had shape and a plan strapped around it. On the street, the light had changed. Clouds were breaking in layered strips, like paper torn carefully by a patient hand. I walked to my car with the sunglasses case tucked back in my bag and a new phrase in my head. My evidence is my boundary. At home, I set a new table for the same play. I folded laundry as if my hands didn't shake. I answered a text from my sister and did not say, I almost married a heist. I watered the fern that drooped in the living room like some exhausted green animal and whispered, hang on. At 6:37, The lock turned. He set down his keys and smiled the smile the world had taught me to trust. I gave him the one I had decided to use. We ate, we talked, he drifted to his office. The door stayed almost, but not quite, closed. I didn't follow this time. I didn't need to. The red LED had already burned itself into the next phase of my life. And somewhere in downtown servers, a copy of his voice waited, with its teeth showing.
The following morning, Denver was cloaked in a pale mist, the kind that blurred the skyline into watercolor. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, watching Trevor scroll his phone like he always did, thumb flicking with mechanical rhythm. To him, it was an ordinary morning. Same toast, same tie, same kiss on the crown of my head as he left at exactly 8:17. To me, it was a countdown. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed the sunglasses case that held the recorder and drove downtown. Patricia and Detective Torres were waiting for me in her office. Torres looked different this time. Grim satisfaction tugged at the corners of his mouth, a file folder fat with evidence tucked under his arm. "Vegas marriage certificate," he said, dropping the folder onto Patricia's desk. "Trevor James Caldwell and Amanda Marie Wilson, 8 months ago. Registered, filed, notarized. Legal as it gets." The words hit like a punch. I had known it already, but hearing it confirmed by official records stripped away any lingering illusions. "Wilson is her maiden name," Torres said, "but here's where it gets twisted. Birth records show her original name was Amanda Caldwell. She's his sister." My stomach lurched. I gripped the arms of my chair, bile rising. His sister? Patricia's pen stilled mid-scratch. "They're married? And they're siblings?" "Not legally married, if we can prove blood relation," Torsia said, "but they've been running this scam together for years. She plays the stable spouse, the anchor back home. He targets women like you, wealthy, isolated, eager for connection. We've identified at least 3 other women in other states who fell for similar schemes. They lost assets, some never recovered." I couldn't breathe for a moment. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a criminal enterprise. Patricia leaned forward, her eyes steel. "We now have bigamy, fraud, conspiracy, potentially incest statutes if prosecutors want to stack charges. But to make this airtight, we need him caught in the act of accessing your funds." Torres nodded. "Based on what you recorded, he's waiting for you to file for divorce. That's his trigger. He thinks once you pull that pin, the prenup clause secures his claim. He'll move fast to access your trust. That's when we nail him." "So I'm supposed to just file?" My voice cracked. "Pretend to walk into the trap?" "Not pretend," Patricia corrected gently. "Do it. File for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. You'll play the heartbroken wife who couldn't endure his distance. He'll believe everything is going according to his plan. That's when the feds step in." "And Amanda?" I asked, my throat dry. Torres's eyes narrowed. "She'll be waiting on the other end of the transaction. Once he makes his move, agents will arrest them both." The thought of Trevor in handcuffs should have filled me with triumph, but all I felt was exhaustion. Still, exhaustion didn't matter. Justice did. That evening, I practiced in the mirror. My face, pale and drawn, became a mask of wounded sorrow. I rehearsed lines. "I just can't do this anymore. I need space. We're not working." Lines that sounded broken, not calculating. At dinner, Trevor noticed my quiet. "You okay?" he asked. Brows knitted just enough to look concerned. I forced a tremor into my voice. "I think maybe we should talk about counseling, or even separation." He froze for the briefest second, then softened his features. "Justine, don't be dramatic. It's only been 6 weeks." "I know," I whispered, letting my eyes fill. "I feel like a stranger in my own marriage." He reached across the table, brushing my hand, an act so rare it startled me. "We'll figure it out." But his eyes betrayed him. Behind the mask of concern, I saw calculation. He wanted me to take the next step. He wanted me to file. Good, let him. 2 days later, I stood in Denver County Courthouse with Patricia at my side. The clerk processed the paperwork without fanfare, stamping the documents with a heavy thunk. My heart pounded as the ink dried, knowing Trevor would soon receive the papers he had been waiting for. "It's done," Patricia murmured. "Now we watch." Torres texted me that later afternoon. "He's moving. Agents in position. Sit tight." I sat in my living room, every tick of the clock louder than the last, imagining Trevor walking into a bank, Amanda waiting in a car outside. I imagined him handing over forged documents, his charming smile greasing the transaction, believing victory was within reach. But this time, he wasn't playing me. He was walking into a cage. Hours later, my phone buzzed again. "Package delivered. Both in custody." I read the words 3 times, barely believing them. Trevor and Amanda caught. The silence in my house felt different that night. Not heavy with lies, but clean, almost sacred. I curled up on the couch, clutching a blanket around me. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe without suspicion. Trevor's voice still echoed in my head. She's compliant. That's what I chose her for. But he had chosen wrong. The next morning, I met Patricia and Torres again. Patricia slid a stack of documents toward me. Arrest reports, preliminary charges, affidavits, wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, bigamy, she listed. The U.S. Attorney's Office is already building the case. With your recordings and the Vegas documents, it's airtight. Torres added, the best part? Your prenup is void. Fraud vitiates consent. He won't see a cent of your trust fund. For the first time since this nightmare began, a genuine smile tugged at my lips. Patricia's gaze softened. He thought he wrote your story, Justine, but you rewrote the ending. I nodded, clutching the papers like armor, and for the first time, I believed her.
The Denver air was sharp that morning. The kind that stings the lungs and makes every sound feel amplified. I stood on the courthouse steps with Patricia, clutching the stamped divorce petition in my bag. To anyone passing by, I was just another woman ending a marriage. But beneath the surface, an entire web was tightening. Detective Torres had explained it carefully. Trevor believed the prenup was his safety net. He thought my filing was the trigger he needed to drain my grandmother's trust. The federal agents weren't just waiting for him. They were watching the exact doors he would try to walk through. And all I had to do was play my part. The night before, Trevor's performance had been flawless. He pretended to be pained, surprised, then resigned when I told him I couldn't go on. He held me in an embrace that was more stagecraft than tenderness. I'm sorry it's come to this, he said softly. The perfect line in a play he thought he had written. Maybe time apart will help us both. I recorded every word. But what I saw wasn't sorrow. It was relief. He believed his plan was working. That belief would walk him straight into handcuffs. At 9:15 a.m., Torres texted, "He's on the move, First National Bank downtown. Amanda's with him, agents in position." I sat in Patricia's office, staring at the phone until my eyes blurred. Patricia poured coffee, her calm presence steady as stone. This is it, Justine. The moment everything turns. Torres had warned me not to come anywhere near the bank. You don't need to see it to know it happened, he had said, but I couldn't stop picturing it. Trevor striding through those glass doors, Amanda waiting in the car, both of them thinking they were minutes away from victory. Later, Torres described it to me in detail. Trevor had entered confidently, folder in hand. Amanda parked outside in a rental car. He greeted the teller with his signature smile, the one that had once charmed me into lowering every guard. He presented the forged paperwork, marriage certificate, spousal authorization forms, letters he had doctored to look official. His voice was smooth, persuasive. To anyone else, he was just another husband handling family finances. But the agents were already inside, disguised as customers, watching every move. When Trevor requested a transfer against my trust fund, the teller politely excused herself, stepping away as if to confirm details. That was the signal. 2 agents approached. "Mr. Caldwell," one said, "can you step aside with us?" Trevor's smile faltered. He tried to protest, to spin another line, but before he could weave his web, the badge came out. His face drained of color. Outside, Amanda saw the commotion. She reached for her phone, but another team was waiting. They boxed in the rental car, weapons holstered but visible. She was yanked from the driver's seat, wrists cuffed before she could even cry out. Torres later told me Trevor tried one last performance. He insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that he loved me, that this was an error in paperwork. But when the agent showed him the text messages, the Vegas marriage license, and, worst of all, the recording of his own voice laying out the scheme, his composure crumbled. The man who had always rehearsed every line suddenly had nothing left to say. At 10:07 a.m., my phone buzzed with a simple text from Torres, package delivered, both in custody. I read it 3 times. the words sinking into me like sunlight after weeks of storm. My body trembled, not with fear, but with release. For weeks, Trevor had controlled the script, manipulated every scene, but now the curtain had dropped. When I returned home that afternoon, the silence of the house was different. Not heavy, not suffocating, free. I stood in the bedroom where he had once told me, "My body is my choice," and felt the weight of irony. He had used boundaries as a weapon, intimacy as bait, trust as leverage. Now, he had nothing. I opened the closet and stared at his suits, his carefully pressed shirts, his polished shoes lined like soldiers, props of a man who had never truly existed. I wanted to burn them, to erase every trace. But Patricia's voice echoed in my mind, patience stapled to documentation, so I closed the door instead. His things would remain untouched. Evidence, not memories. That evening, I met Patricia again. She handed me a copy of the arrest report. Trevor Caldwell and Amanda Caldwell, charged with wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, bigamy, and identity theft. Bail was denied, she said. He's considered a flight risk. Amanda, too. They'll stay in custody until trial. The relief that washed over me was sharp, almost painful. For the first time since my wedding day, I felt like I could breathe deeply. Patricia leaned back, her gaze steady. "You've done more than protect yourself, Justine. You've stopped them from doing this to anyone else." Tears blurred my vision, but I smiled. Then it was worth it. That night, alone in my house, I allowed myself to feel everything: anger, grief, betrayal, but also pride. I had faced a nightmare and refused to be consumed by it. Trevor thought he had chosen the perfect victim. Instead, he had created his own downfall. As I curled into bed, I whispered into the dark, not to him, but to myself. I survived, and for the first time in weeks, sleep came easy. The federal courthouse in downtown Denver loomed like a monument to gravity. Its marble steps were cold underfoot, its tall glass windows reflecting a sky too blue for the weight of what was unfolding inside. I sat in the gallery, with Patricia on one side and Detective Torres on the other, the hum of quiet conversations circling like moths around the fluorescent light. Then they brought him in. Trevor James Caldwell, shackled at the wrists, orange jumpsuit stark against his pale skin. His dark hair was messier than I'd ever seen it, his confident shoulders bent. For the first time, his eyes weren't rehearsed. They darted, frantic, searching for escape routes that no longer existed. Amanda followed, also cuffed, tears streaking her cheeks. She looked less like a conspirator and more like a ghost, her defiance stripped away by the reality of cold bars and locked doors. The sight of them together, siblings bound not by blood alone, but by years of criminal collusion, sent a shiver crawling up my spine. The United States versus Trevor James Caldwell and Amanda Marie Caldwell, the clerk intoned. The prosecutor arose, voice steady and sharp as a blade. "Your Honor, the defendants are charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, aggravated identity theft, and bigamy. Over the past 5 years, they orchestrated an interstate marriage fraud scheme targeting wealthy women, securing assets through manipulation and deceit." Evidence flashed across monitors. Photographs of Trevor with Amanda in Las Vegas, the marriage certificate, the forged documents. Then the recording. Trevor's voice filled the courtroom. "She's compliant. That's what I chose her for. Once she files, we harvest. Simple." Gasps rippled through the room. I watched Trevor flinch as if the words had been a whip across his back. Trevor's lawyer tried to argue misunderstandings, out-of-context recordings, a tragic mix-up, but the mountain of evidence was too steep. The emails, the bank applications, the testimonies from women in 3 other states who came forward after hearing of my case. One by one, they told their stories. Whirlwind romances, quick weddings, sudden coldness, then financial devastation. Trevor and Amanda's pattern was undeniable. Amanda wept openly, her sobs echoing, but Trevor sat stone-faced, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the table. The mask was gone, only the hollow man remained. Weeks later, I returned for the sentencing hearing. The judge's voice rang out, final and unyielding. Trevor James Caldwell, you are hereby sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Amanda Marie Caldwell, you are sentenced to 8 years for your role as an accomplice. The court orders restitution of nearly $2 million to the victims of your scheme. My breath caught. It was justice, not just for me, but for every woman they had deceived. Trevor turned then, his green eyes locking on mine. For the first time, I saw no performance, no strategy, just shock, rage, defeat. He shook his head as if to ask, how did you outplay me? I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I simply held his gaze, steady as stone, until the guards let him away. One evening, I sat on the porch with my sister, sipping wine as the sun dipped behind the Rockies. The sky was streaked with gold and violet, a canvas that promised new beginnings. You're stronger than I've ever seen you, she said quietly. I smiled, not the brittle smile of survival, but something fuller. I had to be, she nodded. And now? Now, I said, exhaling deeply, I write my own script. Trevor thought he could choreograph my life with notes and lies, that he could direct me like an actress on his stage. He was wrong. The revenge I found wasn't fire or fury. It was freedom. It was watching him lose the one thing he had always craved, control. And it was reclaiming the truth that had nearly been stolen from me, that love isn't a performance, trust isn't a contract, and marriage isn't a con. As the stars blinked awake above Denver, I whispered into the night, you chose me because you thought I was weak, but I was the one who ended you. What Trevor thought would be the perfect con turned out to be his downfall. He believed he could silence me, deceive me, and rob me blind. But instead, he ended up behind bars, exposed for who he truly was. I didn't just reclaim my trust fund, I reclaimed my power. This isn't just my story, it's a warning. Never ignore your instincts. Betrayal may break you, but fighting back will remake you even stronger. If this story moved you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs courage, and subscribe for more stories where justice is served.